Welcome to our webinar and thanks for your participation. We have professionals today attending from 25 countries, so it looks like the topic is interesting indeed. Today we are going to talk about mergers and acquisitions, or M&A, especially cross-cultural integrations. What are some real-world experiences and learnings? Cross-cultural matters come in many flavors. What do we mean by cross-cultural? In our discussion today, we are speaking about fault lines in M&A driven by national culture, corporate culture, professional culture, or operating model differences. We will talk about how employees typically experience the merger or acquisition, how cultural differences can further complicate the execution of the integration, and some practical insights on what has worked and what didn't. My name is Petri Järvinen, and I'm the CEO and a partner in Najadaya Analytics. Many of you have seen or are already using our analytics product called People Impact Analytics. Our analytics enables companies identify and mitigate people and culture-related risks in M&A. It measures and understands the employee experiences with the help of emotion behavior science. It uses AI and M&A process intelligence to refine this data into insights and action recommendations, helping to run a more successful integration. But enough about our product, that's not the main topic today. As the more important guy today, I'm delighted to introduce Richard Hicks, the Global Senior People Partner for M&A at Muse. Thank you so much, Rich, for participating in this webinar as a speaker. Rich will tell you about Muse and their M&A experiences in a minute. We have had the privilege to work with Muse for more than a year as they are growing fast and using our analytics to support all their M&A integrations. It has been a very interesting and meaningful journey for sure, and it continues. So Rich, why won't we start by hearing how Muse approaches the M&A? What are you doing actually, and what's your M&A strategy?
Oh, thanks so much, and thanks for the invite to this. It's a privilege and a pleasure to participate in this and speak. So my name is Richard Hicks. I work for Muse, as Petri said. I look after all the M&A and people advisory and delivery piece around our acquisition strategy. My background is tech, so people and IT services. So going back, looking at kind of HP, Hewlett Packard, DXC, large scale outsourcing, acquisition-based businesses in the IT services space over the last kind of 20 years, really, and then moved into advisory with EY for a little bit, and then ended up joining Muse, which has been a very interesting roller coaster as it goes towards this kind of IPO journey. So what is Muse? Muse is the kind of #1 hotelier tech company. So when it's a PMS. So when you think about that, what is that? It's a property management service, but it's actually bigger than that. We run all of the software that is associated with running hotels and spaces. We've been very acquisitive over the last few years. Since 2019, we're a private company. We recently dropped a 300 million investment on a valuation of $2.5 billion, and we're #1 in the market, winning all kinds of different awards. So very, very aggressive growth, 50-60% a year, aggressive headcount growth as well, and market share. And what we're trying to do is effectively hoover up the competition and a market that is rife for consolidation, right, in this space, which is interesting right now because M&A has had a tough few years. But in this particular industry, software as a service sector space for hotelier tech, it's a very acquisitive market and very competitive. So we've been given a mandate to go out there and buy ourselves inorganically and grow inorganically into various markets and spaces. We're very established in EMEA, and we're looking to grow in North America pretty aggressively over the next year or so. And we have a presence as well in the APAC region. So we started acquiring companies in 2019, mostly kind of mini Muses, if you like, so other PMS-based businesses, which allowed us to grow our market share and our share of wallet, increase our customer base, etc. and also acquire key talent and critical kind of industry-based expertise, which would compound the Muse engine and build on our intellect and ability. So in 2019, we acquired our first acquisition in Planet Winner, and we set up like a Muse Ventures organization, which is quite unusual for a private company to have a ventures specific organization. But we set that up, and then we went on a spree over the last few years. So we've got a mixture in here of PMS companies, like I said, mini muses in different kind of countries and demographics, but also product. You know, we have a platform that has over 1,000 integrations. It's the largest and the biggest ecosystem of any software as a service hotelier tech company out there. And we would like to continue, of course, to enhance the platform itself. And by doing so, where we have various deficiencies or where we don't have, or we have a gap, a product gap, we would, of course, do a plug and play and or a bolt-on acquisition or a tuck-in and purchase. So base booking is a good example of that, but of a product consideration. And then if you jump forward a little bit more, we've got a few more kind of PMSs over the last few years, and then you jump to, for example, Atomize, which is an RMS, which is a revenue management system, which is allowing us to further our fintech ambitions in that space, because obviously a lot of our revenue comes from payments from the terminals themselves that are inside hotels. So every every transaction that you make, of course, drives a fee, and then of course that fee is well, that terminal has an application on it or piece of software on it which allows you to make the transaction through banking tech. So we're in that space where we would like a share of that rather than have to pay for that. So we bought Atomize Revenue Management Systems, very clever company, which allows predictive analytics around utilization metrics for rooms in certain locations around the world. When, for example, Taylor Swift is coming to town, it will optimize and understand, this is the price point that hotels should be charging for specific rooms in specific locations at a certain time of the day and that period around times of events. So it's really interesting tech. So we acquire RMS, PMS, and product clarity and FlexKeeping are the last couple that we've done most recently. And actually Data Chat, which is an AI company that we've purchased, because AI is a huge part of our platform as well in terms of taking it to the next level and sort of next generation tech for hoteliers. So very acquisitive, I would say very differentiated, but yeah, lots on our plate, Petri.
Yeah, thanks, Fritz. Let me stop the sharing while we are discussing. We understand that Muse is quite a frequent acquirer, and your journey looked very exciting indeed. And you have been using our people impact analytics in many integrations across cultures, right? So you do have a lot of history already and lots of data about employee experiences during the change. So can you talk a little bit about how people in these target companies, how the people typically experience the acquisition and following integration? What does it mean to them, and how do they feel, and how are they reacting and adapting to the change?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, right? But I think it's one that many M&A, not just people M&A, but M&A professionals out there struggle with in terms of getting the value and worth out of the acquisition itself. And I think people, it's a cliche, right? People are your greatest asset, but it's true, and it's one of the biggest reasons why acquisitions, of course, fail. So I think when we've looked at the last few that we've done, and we've used your analytics and metrics to help us, in a way it's told us what we already knew, but then the beauty of your product is that it tells us what we don't, and it makes visible for us the invisible and what's coming around the corner. And I think one of the biggest things that we can find is with regards to kind of how people feel about the typical experience is the entry point. How do you find out? At the beginning is crucial. How have you found out that you've been acquired? That sets the tone for everything that happens next. I remember a long time ago, back in 2008, I worked at EDS. It's no longer a company anymore, but it was purchased by, it was acquired by Hewlett Packard, and it was a huge deal at the time. And I found out by somebody texting me who was actually didn't work for HP at all, worked for another company, and said, I think you've just been acquired. And it was a Google News link. And I found that out on a taxi on the way to do a sales pitch with a big team for a big deal, outsourcing deal. And of course, as soon as we got there, then the client that we were working with knew as well. And they said, oh, you've just been acquired. And it was very difficult because we weren't informed, we didn't know, and we had to then repivot our pitch, and it didn't set a great tone and mood with regards to what was going to happen next. Now, HP went on to integrate EDS, and they did a really great job of it over a period of 2 years, which was incredibly complex. You know, it was 120,000 people across 75 different countries, but it didn't start well. That didn't feel great. You know, and a lot of that is a lot of how a acquisition is received is how you feel. You know, you don't always remember where you were, you don't always remember what you were doing, but you'll remember how you felt. And I didn't feel good at that point in time. I felt quite angry and frustrated. So my view was immediately skewed about everything that happened next, no matter what information or communication that I received was skewed by that kind of unconscious bias of, well, I didn't even know, no one bothered to tell us beforehand, it was a news leak, it was terrible. So I think, you know, the sequencing of comms is absolutely fundamentally key in consistency of messages in how you're messaging. But for us at Muse, we always make sure that the seller meets first, usually with the employees the day before, at least, usually the day before we land, and then we do our town hall with them so that they have had that message directly from their current CEO. And I think, you know, when you think about that and the consistency of the message, we work with them beforehand to make sure that, look, what you're saying is what we need to say too, because we need to have exactly the same story with nuances, right? So we want to make sure there's consistency. The worst possible thing that can happen is if a CEO were to stand up and say, look, we're going to be acquired, they come in to see us tomorrow, and by the way, you're all going to keep your jobs and you're all going to get 10% pay rises. You know, and we're saying actually something that's a bit different. You know, that's not great entry point. So I think you know, country and business culture and identity are also really important, both collectively and personally. And again, how an acquirer makes you feel is paramount to building that trust. I mean, trust is very easily lost. It's very difficult to gain. And I think the homework that you can do from the due diligence is really important to tailor that approach in moving employees through the change cycle. And you know, like most people will do, I do a presentation in the town hall. I always put up the change you know, curve, which people refer to, and then explain to them, look, you can go backwards and forwards on this change curve. You know, you can start with denial and frustration and anger. In a few days' time, you might move very quickly towards acceptance because you've met us and we're not the big scary bad wolf, and you know, you're okay. You feel like maybe there's going to be a cultural alignment, but then something will happen in 2 weeks' time. You know, you didn't get access to a system, or it's taking too long, or some details are incorrect on Workday, and you can go back to frustration again, or you didn't get something approved. So there's always cycles within the cycle, and we talk a lot about that. But you know, setting the scene is really important with them as well. So we found, like, meeting people physically where they are, like on site. We all bother to take a landing party of leadership on site, and we make sure that those early town hall discussions, you know, explaining the deal rationale, the value that they're going to bring, why we've done the transaction, why them, you know, the respect that we have for them as an acquirer, it all helps to begin to kind of disarm and then preempt any kind of triggered, you know, behavior. And we tend to give a lot of information at Muse here. We don't apologize for that. We do go for information overload rather than less, because we just feel like employees typically respond better if they have a lot more information than not, and that we've bothered to kind of think about the kinds of questions you know, that they would have. Obviously, NIADIA assessments are very crucial for us. We take the learnings of the previous transaction, because every transaction is different, of course, into the next one. You know, we try and compound the learnings there and understand any of the pain points that perhaps we didn't spot in earlier acquisitions. And the last thing to think about as well is we try and generate this plan for every person. You know, if we have a personalized plan, or if you don't have a personalized plan for every person going through the integration journey, you know, and you've not bothered to meet them one-to-one and understand some of their goals, aspirations from a career perspective, etc. You generate a buddy network with maybe middle leader champions, you know, then employees do become quite disengaged, and you know, then you can get some cases then where you get subcultures that start to develop, and you know, and you can get maybe a rogue counterculture, which then makes it very difficult for you to kind of drive change, or to introduce maybe more challenging topics for people to digest. So we tend to find that that's the kind of cycle that we have. Obviously, it's very different country to country and business to business, but those are some of the feelings that people have, and how we approach you know, M&A at Muse.
Yeah, makes sense. So the entry point, communications, engaging the people, planning for everybody being present. These are some of the things that I picked from here. But can you go a little bit deeper, reach to the cultural aspect, because you are operating globally in many continents and countries, right? And also you do have a very distinct corporate culture. So what things are you seeing? Can you share some experiences on how the cultural differences matter?
Absolutely, yeah. So one thing I think we've got better at doing over the last how long have I been here now? A couple of years, but I would say the last sort of two to 3 years, the last maybe like 7, 8 transactions we've done it. We meet people in the middle better, so, and we manage expectations a little better, I think. So Muse is a very intense culture. It's hugely performance driven. We are a high performing culture, and it's a very demanding environment, but in the best possible way. It's also a very nurturing and supportive environment, but there's a lot going on, and the expectation levels are very high. You know, we do have a strong wellness culture, but a strong autonomous, what we call a grown-up culture. You know, so if you need time off, you take it. We have unlimited leave, you know, so you can say to your boss, yeah, if I had a real week this week, you know, I'm just going to take Friday, I need the day, I'm retired. You can just do that. No one's going to judge, because everyone understands that the work here that we do is very intense, and the bar is exceptionally high, and we all push each other to be the best version of ourselves. So if you need to take time, then take the time. But there's a very learning and development based culture, and marginal gains culture as well. We fail quickly, you get back up, etc. And there's a safe psychological space. Now that speed is operating across the entire business, and we're very well aware that when we buy organizations, they may not be coming from the same culture, right? It's not to say that there's a right and a wrong, but we do, I think, a better job of understanding organizational fit through different assessments that we do beforehand. Again, NIDA is very useful to do that at the front end. But we also have started to understand, you know, what is important to people, and where there are pain points which surface, which perhaps we actually overlook sometimes, because we just assume that it's a non-event, when it is an important position for people. And I think something that's really interesting is on-site versus remote. Now, this is really interesting for us, right? Because we're a remote-first company. We do have an HQ in Prague. It's in a beautiful building, decorated like a hotel. It's like a boutique hotel, so it's designed to be like an experience that you would have.
Of course, you have.
It's amazing. And we do have other satellite sites too. But when we buy a new company somewhere, the on-site piece is actually a big deal. People want to know, am I keeping my office? You know, I don't want to work remotely. I don't have a big social life, and my social life is through work and through working inside the office, etc. And we have to have a very careful view on how we manage that, and maybe sunset the side later on, do a lot of work around remote working to make people understand what that means for us, and how we can still have an inclusive culture even though we are remote. We spend a lot of money on offsites. So where we save money on real estate, we put the money in to allow people to be able to travel and come together on offsites, and cohabit for, you know, a number of times through the year with different events, and with a bit of a party culture. So we allow, you know, people to have a lot of fun, and we get a good budget for that, so people can go out and enjoy themselves, and nice meals and nice hotels, etc. So it's very interesting to kind of see that bridge. But again, you know, Gen Z, Gen X sort of versus, if you like, a Gen Z. They want different things out of work. I'm kind of more X, I guess, but I'm working with an average age in my company of like, I think it's like 29. So they want very different things from work. So we have to have like that conversation up front around expectation and, do we provide the right level of mix of benefits for you? I think something else to think about as well is entering a new kingdom, as we call it. So if you're in a new territory or country, it's really critical that you understand as an acquirer the working culture, not just the country culture, and the practices that you've now kind of bought into. You've bought into that, and you need to show respect for that and an understanding of how you implement change, and then the pace of the change, the type of the change, and then the consequences of that change, and how it's going to be received for that particular cohort. And I think, for example, if you're a US company and you're buying in France or you're buying in India, you can't take a US kind of blueprint and then panel beat that into the company and say, right, this is the way we do things, and then you guys have to just crack on. Obviously, it's much more nuanced than that, and it won't be well received because they're very different working cultures, and there's different consideration points. I think the other thing as well is, like, I talk a lot about being a big fish in a small pond. You acquire a company of 50 people. It's a small company, right? So there's going to be a few people in there that are going to feel like they have a good level of importance and they add a lot of value, and they do. But then if they were sales inside that company, and you come into a company like Muse, which is 1,400 people, and our sales community is hundreds of people, then you're going to feel like that's that kind of big fish in a small pond, and then the small fish in a big pond scenario. And that's a tough adjustment to make sometimes, and it's easy to lose identity and feel unseen in some of those transitions. And another thing as well, which we've actually fallen, down a couple of times with, and we've heard, is the language of business. Most businesses in the Western world, of course, adopt English as their language of business, but that's always assumed, and it probably shouldn't be. And it's kind of arrogant to assume that everyone speaks English, and this can feel quite alienating. And we did find this was a challenge when we did an acquisition. I won't name it, but we in a particular country, and we were told.
Yeah, we saw the analysis results on that particular one.
Yeah, that's right, you did. And we were told by the CEO at the time, don't worry, everybody speaks English. They all learned it at school, so they'll understand what you're saying. But bear in mind, this particular acquisition was in a pretty remote area of this country, so it's a very local employer. Everyone speaks that language, and there was no need for them to really speak English. So we, of course, rock up and we do a presentation in the town hall, and we're kind of pleased with ourselves and how it's going. But there's a bunch of people at the front rows who seem super disengaged, and we figured, like, okay, we have to work on them. They don't seem to be very happy. And we presented for like maybe 2 hours, and they couldn't understand a word we said. And it was mortifying. So we had to really kind of adjust, and we recovered the situation pretty quickly by bringing German speakers in. So I've given a little bit away, but it was, but we figured that out and we recovered. But again, that going back to what I said earlier, the point of entry, how it makes you feel. They didn't feel great. I didn't feel great. Felt terrible, and so did the rest of the leadership team. So we kind of tried to address that immediately, and we did gain a bit of trust back by doing so. But the damage is already done. The assumption that everybody speaks the language of business, which is English, of course. So in country, cultural assumptions, of course, can drive poor decisions, and there's other biases as well. Like, the US works the longest hours or takes the least leave because they have like maybe less employment law or legislative provisions and protection in that country, or Europeans have lots of that in a more socialist society. So therefore, they take a lot of leave, and then there's assumptions around, well, those countries and cultures are lazy, don't work much, and it's all unconscious bias, which is plain wrong, because you have to test those assumptions, and you have to have a respect. But of course, that all feeds into integration, and it feeds into kind of synergy, and it feeds into transformation decisions, and those unconscious biases are then really where deals fail to realize their value, because they disrupt, and they in a way can disrespect a workforce, and then you get attrition, and then you get challenges with your operating model and org designs, etc., because they don't really come to fruition. So I think again, we talk a lot about understanding, what's going to be well received and what isn't going to be well received, and we do a lot of work with the CEOs up front to kind of, who are still considered to be like the spiritual leaders, if you like, of the acquired company, and we make sure that nobody feels kind of bypassed or marginalized. Because the assumption is perhaps, oh, well, the CEO is only going to be interested in their earnout. Well, that's a huge assumption in itself, right? Because they care about the employees that have been brought in, and they want to make sure everybody is landing correctly. So again, that really impacts like kind of role modeling behaviors. So we work very hard to make sure we get the CEOs kind of on side and socialize some of the things that we're looking to do as well, because then they can help translate that into the language of their business. And then that helps a lot, and it's a journey. It's a journey.
Yeah. So the differences are truly, they are about the corporate culture differences and also about the regional culture differences and everything which comes with those differences. So not a small challenge indeed. And look, everybody wants to learn from experiences and collect and develop best practices and improve the processes and so on. So for this purpose, can you name maybe one common practice in M&A which almost inevitably leads to bad outcomes? So maybe something related to cultural differences. What shouldn't someone be doing in the M&A?
I'm conscious of the time, so I will be quick, but I could name so many, but I would say the standout in my experience that I often see repeated is a mismanagement of the psychological contract. So, what is the psychological contract? It's that expectation between that an employer has of its employee and then the employee has of the employer. And I think that's complex enough in itself. But when you add a new employer to the mix, it does create a lot of ambiguity and kind of confusion and friction. And expectations are not made clear. Or not explained at all or mismanaged. I think that's a huge challenge on a back foot straight away, and that does lead to bad outcomes when you're just not clear because it's too hazy.
Yeah, the expectation setting is really important, and we could be talking the whole day about it. But then finally, conversely, what about something which you absolutely should be doing? What's the one best practice that you would choose?
I think one thing we've learned is that, a tailored acclimation and orientation or welcome event for employees is really important. It's not just for the announcement, but, where there's absolutely should be like a warm and exciting union between the companies, but fun activities with the kind of, we love our merch at Muse, so we have a huge marketing department and we give away a lot of stuff. And then followed up with what we do is we do a 2 to 3 day actual on-site at our HQ immersive induction into the company, just like a new hire would have, but we specifically tailor it for an acquired employee journey, and it kind of showcases the acquirer to show respect for the target company and its identity, and it discusses the similarities and the differences quite openly between the two companies, and begins to lay good foundations for trust. So for the upcoming integration process, so we kind of lay those seeds in the ground, and then acquired employees, of course, they enter the business through a very different point of entry. They're not new employees; they have jobs already, so they must be treated. They can't be treated as new hires because they're not. So we do a lot of work to kind of immerse, and we actually bring them to HQ. Now, there's an expense to that, of course, to fly people in. But we always see a great value in doing that, and it really increases the engagement.
Yeah, thanks. So again, it's about the entry point and the engagement and planning for everybody, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Which makes total sense to me. So look, our time is pretty much up. So that has been most interesting discussion. So to recap, we have discovered how the cultural issues really matter in M&A integrations. We talked about how the employees experience the change, and we even learned some do's and don'ts. So thanks, Rich, for that, and thanks so much to your time and participation here, and thanks to everybody for participating. Please do contact me or Rich if you have anything to talk about these matters, right? And then we do have our People Impact Analytics solution, which can help you navigate all these matters. We are happy to talk with you. We are selling and delivering worldwide directly to the clients and also growing our partner network. So hoping to talk with you again soon. We did get a few questions here as well, but the time is up, so we will respond to everybody directly by email. So thanks, Rich. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Take care. All the best.